Across northern England, parts of Scotland, many places here dry, much of Northern Ireland dry, and the east coast also largely dry and fine. But again, there will be a lot of cloud and temperatures high teens, low 20s. Still a few of those heavy showers around on Friday evening. Could be dropping a lot of rain in a short space of time, so could cause a few issues, particularly so on the roads. As we go into the weekend, those weather fronts we talked about earlier out west will be moving in with low pressure, so some wet and increasingly windy weather to the northwest, but staying mostly dry and getting warm once more across parts of the southeast.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We're trying to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. So it's Liz versus Rishi. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? What do the public think about them? What do Conservative Party members think of them? We'll be discussing all of that in the show. Also, stay with me because we have a constituency surgery with a mum who lost her 15-year-old daughter through death through illegal drugs. She's working with her MP to get tougher sentences for dealers, and we're going to speak to her and her MP later in the show. All that after the news with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Gloria. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The BBC has agreed to pay substantial damages to the former nanny of Princes William and Harry. It's over false and malicious allegations about her use to obtain Martin Bashir's 1995 Panorama interview with Princess Diana. Well, our royal reporter Cameron Walker has more on this story. Cameron, what's the latest?
So this is centred around the 1995 BBC Panorama interview where Diana famously said there were three of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. And it was conducted and obtained by a former BBC journalist, Martin Bashir. Now, an investigation authorised by the BBC and led by Lord Dyson found that Bashir manipulated Diana into giving that interview. Bashir told Diana that Tiggy Legbert, now known as Alexandra Pettifer, had an affair with Prince Charles and falsely accused her of becoming pregnant with Prince Charles's baby and then having an abortion. So Diana went into this interview in possession of false facts. Now, today, the BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, has publicly apologised to Miss Pettifer, Prince Charles, Princes William and Harry as well for the false and malicious allegations used to obtain the interview. All of this, of course, happening just over a month until the 25th anniversary of Princess Diana's death in Paris.
Cameron, thank you. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have begun their head-to-head battle to become the next Prime Minister. The former Chancellor and the current Foreign Secretary are the final two contenders after Penny Mordaunt was eliminated yesterday. They'll now take part in a series of hustings and live TV debates over the summer. More than 160,000 Conservative Party members will then decide who should take over from Boris Johnson, with voting open until the 2nd of September. Ms Truss told GB News if she becomes Prime Minister, the Tory party will win the next election.
What people right across Britain care about is how we are going to help them with the cost of living, how we're going to unleash opportunity. And I'm somebody who can get things done in government. I've shown that I'm willing to push things through Whitehall, and that's why we need to cut taxes. We shouldn't have raised national insurance in the first place. We need to cut it now. We need a moratorium on the green energy levy to cut people's fuel bills. And we need to power recovery by attracting investment, getting new businesses to set up.
The Home Office's handling of the Channel's small boat crisis has been deemed ineffectual by a watchdog report. The Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration has called for a more strategic response to migrant crossings. David Neal wrote in his report that the Home Office response exposed gaps in security procedures, leaving vulnerable migrants at risk. Soaring inflation has pushed the UK's budget deficit to its highest level since April last year. The Office for National Statistics says public sector borrowing rose to almost £23 billion. That's up from £12.5 billion in May. It's the second highest June borrowing since records began. Chancellor Nadhim Zahawi, though, says the government is on track to get debt down. Change is needed to reduce the number of drug deaths in Scotland. That's according to a new 3-year study. The report issued by the Drugs Deaths Task Force urges authorities to move their approach away from punishment and towards care. It also says a UK-wide change in law is needed to allow safe consumption rooms and reduce fatalities. In 2020, there were more than 1,300 drug-related deaths in Scotland. That's higher than any other European country. Angela Constance, SNP Minister for Drug Policy, says we have to follow the evidence.
This is where we need to be bold and brave and follow the evidence. And the evidence internationally and from around the world shows that while safe drug consumption rooms are not a silver bullet, because nothing is, but they do help to save lives. So we know what works, we just need to get on and do it. And that's about that whole system of care and support for people that are most marginalised and excluded in our society.
And Gatwick Airport has hired 400 new security staff to help ease queuing ahead of the school holidays. Bosses say they're doing everything they can to make the process as smooth as possible. It follows months of disruption and delays. Improvements include passengers being shown how to separate hand luggage liquids to try and reduce delays at security. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back to the briefing with Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, now there are two. Either Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss will be the next Conservative leader and our Prime Minister. We'll find out which on the 5th of September. I'll bring you the latest from Westminster and talk to politicians, experts and pollsters about what happens next. And I'll talk to a mother whose 15-year-old daughter died after taking MDMA, the Class A drug. She and her MP are working to change the laws to better protect our children. We'll also be talking drug deaths in Scotland, which, of course, has a horrendous record on drug abuse. And as always, I would love to hear from you. Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. And then there were two. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are the two candidates who will go head-to-head. In a summer of hustings and debates, they will try to win the Conservative leadership and become the new Prime Minister. Joining us now is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who is in Westminster for us. So, Darren, the contest moves from Westminster and out into the country.
Yeah, it does indeed, Gloria. MPs are about to break up for their summer holidays. It is clearly not a coincidence that they made that decision down to the final two last night. And you're right, the campaign has already effectively begun to try and win over Conservative members. We're going to see a hell of a lot of hustings over the next 5-6 weeks or so, and indeed TV debates too, as those two candidates, Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, trying to convince not us, not you and I and the millions of other people across the country, but rather 160,000 Conservative members to back them in this contest. And we're starting to see clearly those big dividing lines, those big policy issues being laid out by both candidates today. It is going to be a pretty busy summer, I would suggest, Gloria, and my colleague Paul Hawkins has been looking at the process about how this is all going to play out in the weeks to come.
The numbers of votes cast for each candidate is as follows. Mordaunt, 105. Sunak, 137. Truss, 113. Therefore, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will be the candidates going forward to a final ballot of Conservative Party members.
Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will slug it out to be the next Conservative leader and your Prime Minister. It's the final round of voting, and now it goes to the party members, not just the MPs. Over the next 6 weeks, expect lots of campaigning, interviews, several hustings, and at least one televised debate. And before you think about becoming a member to get a vote, don't bother. You can only vote if you've been a member for 3 months. If that's you, then from August the 1st, you'll start to receive a ballot pack with instructions on how to vote, either by post or online. The recommended way, which also uses special codes to make sure the vote is secure. If you're on holiday, don't worry. The party says you can apply for an email to be sent to you with the codes so you can apply online. So how many Conservative members are there? Well, the official number isn't known, but at the last leadership election in 2019, there were around 160,000 members. Insiders say that number is likely to have grown a bit, but it'll still be less than 0.5% of the electorate deciding who the next PM is. They've got until 5 p.m. on Friday, the 2nd of September to vote. The winner, their party leader, and the UK's next Prime Minister will be announced on Monday, the 5th of September.
I think it's really interesting, Gloria, isn't it, that when we see this battle play out, just about how brutal it's going to be, clearly there is this big policy divide on taxation and how to get the economy growing again. But we got a hint at some of the personal attacks, didn't we, in some of the TV debates at the end of last week. Will we see that resurface? Blue on blue attacks? Will that be good for the Conservative Party? Clearly not. But can both candidates ensure that they won't go down that route in that battle to win over members?
It's going to be a challenge, isn't it, Darren? We'll watch it with much interest. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, thank you. So, though Rishi Sunak is the clear favourite among Conservative MPs, it's now up to the membership, and they seem to be leaning towards Liz Truss. One of the many MPs who wants Rishi Sunak to be our next Prime Minister is Kevin Hollinray, Conservative MP for Thirsk and Malton, and he joins me now. Kevin, it's a pleasure to see you. What does Rishi have that Liz doesn't?
Hi, Gloria. Well, I think many things. It's a clear choice, in my view. As you said, you got 20% more votes amongst MPs than Liz did. Now it goes to members, and we want that kind of strong mandate from members. I think he's got the intellect, he's got the character, and he's incredibly articulate. It's a communications business, it's politics, and he can explain, what we're going to do about the economy. We're going to grow the economy, and then we can cut taxes. How we're going to make the best of Brexit, and most importantly, because you can't, as you know, Gloria, you can't do anything in politics unless you're in power. How are we in the next election? And poll after poll shows that Rishi's in a much better place in terms of likelihood of winning the next election.
We have a cost of living crisis. Everybody knows that. Rishi Sunak is one of the richest, probably the richest politicians in the House of Commons. How do you counter the suggestions that he's simply too rich to understand the struggles that ordinary families are going through right now?
Well, to me, rich or poor shouldn't matter in terms of your background. It should be about who you are and what policies you adopt. I've seen Rishi with his constituents of all kind of different ilks, all kind of different backgrounds. He's brilliant with all of them. He really is somebody who gets under the skin of people's issues and can help to solve them. And just look what he's done in terms of what he did through the pandemic, in terms of the support he gave businesses and supporting jobs, people through that crisis, and now what he's done for the cost of living crisis, giving £1,200 for all our households with the lowest incomes. That's really will help them through this very difficult few months and a year or so at least. I think that inflation crisis will continue. So he does understand the issues at grassroots level. But most importantly, he's got the intellect and the expertise and the ideas to solve those problems.
I don't know if you've seen the Daily Mail today. It seems to be in full support Liz mode. Do you think it matters what newspapers say in a campaign? Does it make a difference to the chances of the candidates in this election?
Of course it does, because people read newspapers and they listen to programmes like yours, Gloria, and of course people are influenced by that. But I urge members to look at the facts and look at, I saw a poll in the Times today where 92% of, it's one of these online polls, they're not totally reliable, 92% of people who fill that form in thought Rishi was the best Prime Minister. So there'll be different perspectives on this, of course, but to me, look at the rational facts. Of course, Rishi's had to put up taxes to deal with the current crisis because we want to be a party that cuts taxes, and of course that's popular amongst people. We're also a party balancing the books, and he knows he's had to take the tough decisions in terms of balancing the books for all the money we've had to spend over recent years. But once we get over this and the economy's back on track, Rishi wants to cut taxes. He'll set that out very clearly. I just urge members to look at the facts, look at the track record people have had in their jobs. Rishi's been in the toughest job in the Parliament, apart from the Prime Minister, in the last couple of years, and I think done a sterling job.
And how do you avoid this contest being defined by blue-on-blue attacks, trashing not just each other but also the record of the government?
Yeah, I think it's really important we don't. This should be about the issues, not about the person. So really important that it's got to be a robust debate. Of course, you're going to point out what your strengths are and the potential issues with the other candidate, and I support that. I actually thought there were some moments in the wider leadership contest where it did get too much across the line, I think, in terms of personal criticism. But generally, I thought the debate was good, and it's very important we have that debate. And I think we can really show the Conservative Party its best light about ideas and about how we implement those ideas. But we are responsible. We've got to balance the books. Labour are very good. I'm sorry, Gloria, I know you're a Labour MP, but very good at spending money and not explaining where they're going to get the money back in from. We have to balance the books. We're £2.36 trillion in debt. That can't continue. We've got to take a responsible approach. I think Rishi does that.
Why do you think Liz is doing better amongst the members than Rishi Sunak? By the way, I've also seen stuff on Twitter which Boris Johnson famously yesterday told us to ignore, but some sort of quite horrible never Rishi, calling him a backstabber, saying that he did for Boris Johnson. It's not pleasant, is it? Why is Liz ahead with members?
Well, just to be clear, that wasn't Boris saying that on Twitter, Gloria. And we know what Twitter's like. You get all kinds of people saying all kinds of things. Best ignored, in my view. Of course, it's a popular message to give people that you want to cut taxes, but you've got to do that responsibly. And I think Rishi will set out what he's done over the last 2 years. What he's done really is just paid for the stuff that we've bought over the last 2 years. We put hundreds of billions of pounds into the economy to try and solve the COVID crisis, which we did very successfully, and then another about £40 billion to help households with the cost of living. That's got to be paid for, and you pay for it either by people paying higher bills or you pay it through general taxation. And Rishi has said, well, we're going to have to pay this through general taxation. Of course, it's a popular message. You can keep cutting taxes without paying for it, but that's not what we do. We've never done that as a party. We balance the books. We get more people in jobs. That's what Rishi will do. But there's no doubt there's going to be a lot of pain over the next few months in terms of the cost of living crisis. So we've got to take a responsible approach to that. If you cut taxes right now, you'll further fuel the inflation crisis. And that is very, very bad for people on low-income households. We've got to take that responsible approach.
Kevin Hollinrake, really good to speak to you on this issue. We're going to speak to you later in the programme with one of your constituents as you work together to get tougher on drug dealers. I'm very much looking forward to that chat with you later. Kevin Hollinrake, thanks for now. Well, Liz Truss spoke to GB News in a television exclusive this morning and outlined why she should be our next Prime Minister. Let's have a look.
Because we've only got 2 years till a general election. We need to hit the ground running We need to get on with changing our economy to really deliver for people right across the country. So I'm not going to be thinking about wallpaper. Maybe the one thing people don't know about me is I do love 1980s music and I do love karaoke. So as well
What's
as
your
working
go-to
hard,
song?
I like to enjoy music as well. My favourite song is I Want to Dance by Whitney Houston.
Good tune. I love that. I can see you walking on stage to that song if you win.
But listen, if you do win, and whoever wins Foreign Secretary, would you rule out either working over Rishi Sunak or under Rishi Sunak?
No, I wouldn't, because after this leadership contest, the most important thing is that we unite as a party and that we defeat Keir Starmer at the election. And we need all our players on the pitch. During this leadership election so far, we've had fantastic candidates present themselves, Penny, Kemi, Tom Tugendhat, Rishi. And we need to make sure that those talents are being fully used as part of a new Conservative vision. It is quite frustrating that female politicians always get compared to Margaret Thatcher, whereas male politicians don't get compared to Ted Heath. So I think we need to equalise the scales.
I think Rishi Sunak would like to be compared to Margaret Thatcher, wouldn't he?
Well, look, I think we all know what's been happening in government, and as Foreign Secretary, I've been somebody who's been prepared to take on Whitehall, to take the bold decisions, whether it's on the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, whether it's on the trade deals I struck, including with Australia and Japan. I've pushed those things through and I've made stuff happen. And I think that's what people are going to care about in this leadership election. We've got 2 years to deliver for people. We can't continue with having the highest tax rates for 70 years. We've got to cut taxes, we've got to get the economy going, and we've got to really hit the ground running in September.
Liz Truss, Prime Minister, does it have a ring about it?
I believe it does, and I believe that I'm somebody that can not only deliver the change we need and deliver the promises we made to people in 2019, but I can also go on and win the next general election.
And that was Liz Truss speaking to Eamon and Isabel this morning. After the break, I will be joined by my very special Thursday panel, Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor from the Daily Mirror, and Andrew Pearce, Consultant Editor at the Daily Mail. There will be fireworks. Before that, it's a short break.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment. We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So after all the drama of the last couple of weeks, we now know that either Rishi Sunak or Liz Truss will be our next Prime Minister. Joining me now is our favourite double act, Andrew Pearce, consultant editor at the Daily Mail, and Kevin Maguire, associate editor at the Daily Mirror. Good to see you both, as ever. Andrew, your paper, the Daily Mail, has given Liz Truss a lot of space today. She's even got the front page. So tell me why you think Liz Truss is the best candidate to win the next election for the Tories.
Well, I will say this. If she doesn't win, she could always get a job as a replacement Dalek, because she has got the worst voice, hasn't she? And that is a real problem for her. I think content, policy-wise, she's fine, but presentation, she's woeful. And she's not got a lot of time to improve. And I think Rishi is a very slick presenter, very slick at presenting himself. But actually, I think he's a bit too slick. Why we're backing Liz Truss? Look, she was the cabinet minister who spoke out against the rise in national insurance. Quite right too. I cannot understand for the life of me why a Conservative chancellor put up taxes as we're potentially going into recession, coming out of the aftermath of COVID, in the worst cost of living crisis for 50 years. She did speak out. She was quite principled about it. And Rishi has saddled us with this enormous tax burden. He made it absolutely clear during the leadership contest he's not in favour of cutting taxes, although he's written an article in the Daily Telegraph today saying he's going to do something on personal taxation. Hang on, mate. You just lumbered us with the biggest tax bill for 70 years. That's why we're supporting Liz Truss. She's been around a long time. She's been a minister for a long time. She's experienced. And I think she'll be quite good in a crisis, despite that voice.
Despite that voice. Kevin, you obviously want to see a Labour government come the next election. So who do you want to see? Who do you think is in the best interests of the Labour Party in this contest?
Oh, Liz Truss, no doubt. She'd be out of her depth in a puddle, Gloria. I'm not quite sure what she really stands for. She likes to dress like Margaret Thatcher. She ain't Margaret Thatcher. I knew Margaret Thatcher, not as well as Andrew, but I was there, and whatever I thought about her policies, I could see that she was a figure of real substance, while Truss just blows in the wind. I think people like Andrew's paper, the Daily Mail, the ERG, the Brexit Spartans, they will back her because they'll think she'll be a puppet and they can pull her strings. Rishi Sunak, again, whatever you think of him politically, at least as an adult, and he has a much higher intellect. He's a lot cleverer. Labour feared Penny Mordaunt. That's who they didn't want to get the candidacy, because they thought she'd be a fresh face, could be presented as somebody who won a Labour seat, made it very safe, has an interesting backstory. But Labour licking their lips at facing Truss or Sunak. They won't worry about that. Would have preferred Boris Johnson to stumble on because he was mortally wounded, had lost his mojo. But they will now be saying, we love Liz. Come on. Liz will Liz. Get Liz Truss into number 10 because they think she's really beatable at a general election.
Kevin has completely skated over the fact, Gloria, that Rishi Sunak has, like Boris Johnson, been fined for Partygate. That will be an issue that the Labour Party will whack him with. They'll also whack him with the fact his wife was a non-dom until he was exposed by the media a few weeks ago. He said it was outrageous that we were persecuting his wife. We were entitled to know that the man who's in charge of our finances, that his wife was a non-dom, the daughter of a billionaire. He's also had a green card, i.e. could live in the United States until last October. What was he keeping his options open? If I don't become Prime Minister, maybe I'll go and live in the United States, where, by the way, Gloria, he's got a very nice £5 million apartment. Look, he's incredibly rich. I don't have a problem with that. But let me tell you, Labour will make hay about that. They'll say, if he's that rich, how can he possibly empathise with working class people who are struggling to fill their car up with petrol if he's that rich? And you know what? It's probably a legitimate criticism.
Andrew, the danger of all this is that, as you've actually indicated, we're going to see a lot of blue-on-blue attacks. Yeah. These candidates, they're going to trash each other. They're trashing the record of this government. Isn't that the real danger and the real opportunity for the Labour Party?
Well, actually, I think that was...
Gloria, look, I'd endorse everything Andrew just said about Rishi Sunak.
Well, that makes
it's blue on blue, as you say. We saw at Prime Minister's questions yesterday that Keir Starmer could just quote back what one minister said about another minister. You don't have to make it come from the Labour corner anymore. You can just say, look, they're fighting like rats in a sack. They all hate each other. They detest each other. They pretended
that they all got on. No, they don't. We see it. And they're also trashing 12 years of the Conservatives in power, pretending none of it had anything to do with them, despite the fact that both Sunak, until very recently, and Truss still were in the cabinet making those decisions. It's a gift for Labour, an absolute gift.
Look, this isn't the first time. It's not the first time there's been a leadership contest while the Conservatives are in power. They will fix this very quickly. The debate between Sunak and Truss will be much more civilised than the ridiculous debates they had on ITV and on Channel 4, where, of course, it was a completely left-wing audience baying and jeering at everything the Tories said. So I think it'll be a much more grown-up debate, and actually quite good for the Tories to re-examine where they're going after 12 years in power. Because, look, they're tired, they've been in power a long time, and I think they've become listless and we're in danger of losing direction under Boris Johnson. Now they can recharge the batteries, and it will be very good for the Tories. And actually, that's what the Labour Party must be worrying about, that they do recharge the batteries, and that Liz Truss, if she wins, or Rishi, if he wins, can make the Tories look like yet another new government. We've had Cameron, we've had May, Boris, and now we get a fourth one. And Labour eat their hearts out. We could have another woman leader. Labour still haven't chosen a woman leader.
You can't keep fooling people. They will know it's not a new government. And Gloria, one other thing with Liz Truss, 2016 Remainer, the Conservative attempt to paint Starmer as somebody, look, you were a Remainer, you'd get Brexit undone. It'll be exactly the same with her now. Go with Liz Truss and you neuter any Brexit attack on Keir Starmer at the next election.
Perhaps the most effective... I'm not going to interrupt, gentlemen. Carry on.
Boris got it right about Keir Starmer yesterday. He called him a boring bollard. That's exactly what he is.
Pointless
He's
human bollard.
He's boring and dull. What was it exactly?
Pointless human bollard.
Exactly. That's exactly what he is. Useless
a
and
bollard
dull
is more useful than Liz Truss. She would be what my dad would call an oxygen waster. Look, she didn't stand for anything of any value. She'll just blow with the wind. You know, Andrew. It's going to be fantastic. I hope you get her as your leader. I really do. I'm praying. Look, come on. Please, please, Tories, elect Liz Truss.
Okay, final point. Let me ask one question. It's a yes or... It's a sort of very short answer from both of you. Boris Johnson, he did his final Prime Minister's questions yesterday. It was a historic moment. Do you think, Andrew, that he will serve his time loyally on the backbenches till the next election?
He will serve loyally on the backbenches to the next election if Liz Truss is Prime Minister. If Rishi Sunak's Prime Minister, look out. Because he did say, didn't he, at the dispatch box, my advice to my successor, always look in the rear mirror to see what's going on behind you. It will be a big problem for Rishi because he's still a big, big beast in that Tory jungle. And I'm going to miss him for what it's worth.
OK. And Kevin, do you think Boris Johnson, we're looking at an Uxbridge by-election, or do you think he will be silent, chipping into debates on the backbenches?
Yeah, I'll miss the lying, lazy, incompetent for different reasons to Andrew. I don't think he'll have a by-election because he wants the 85 grand a year plus all the allowances. He can use that position to write his books and get more money and pop up every now and again and snipe. So I don't think he'll do what Cameron did or Blair did and quit and force a by-election. However, he might create some other by-elections if he gives Nadine Dorries, Nigel Adams, some of his cronies in the House of Commons, he gives them peerages in what promises to be the most controversial resignation list since the Lavender List and Harold Wilson.
Kevin and Andrew, you lighten up not just my week, you lighten up my life. What a joy you are. See you next week.
Lovely to talk to you, Gloria. Lovely to talk to you. Sorry about Kevin.
Coming up on the briefing, we'll speak to a mum who lost her 15-year-old daughter to Class A drugs and her MP who's working with her. They want tougher sentences for dealers. First, it's the news with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Gloria. It's 12:32. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have begun their head-to-head battle to become the next Prime Minister. The former Chancellor and the current Foreign Secretary are the final two contenders after Penny Mordaunt was eliminated yesterday. More than 160,000 Conservative Party members will now decide who should take over from Boris Johnson. Liz Truss told GB News she'll correct mistakes of the past.
Need to cut taxes. We shouldn't have raised national insurance in the first place. We need to cut it now. We need a moratorium on the green energy levy to cut people's fuel bills. And we need to power recovery.
The BBC has agreed to pay substantial damages to the former nanny of Princes William and Harry. It's over false and malicious allegations about her used to obtain Martin Bashir's 1995 panorama interview with Princess Diana. Tiggy Legg-Burke also received a public apology from the BBC at the High Court in London. The Home Office's handling of the Channel's small boat crisis has been deemed ineffectual by a watchdog report. The Independent Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration has called for a more strategic response to migrant crossings. David Neal says that the Home Office response exposed gaps in security procedures, leaving vulnerable migrants at risk. Soaring inflation has pushed the UK's budget deficit to its highest level since April last year. The Office for National Statistics says public sector borrowing rose to almost £23 billion, up from £12.5 billion in May. It's the second highest June borrowing since records began. Major cultural change is needed to reduce the number of drug deaths in Scotland. That's according to a new 3-year study. The report issued by the Drugs Deaths Task Force urges authorities to move their approach away from punishment and towards care. It also says a UK-wide change in law is needed to allow safe consumption rooms and reduce fatalities. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. It's back to the briefing with Gloria in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
We are GB News.
We're right across this great nation.
On TV.
On radio.
On digital. Absolutely everywhere.
We don't talk down to you.
We embrace all voices with honest and civilised conversation.
We are not part of the establishment.
We're one of you.
And we're only getting started.
Join us on GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, Matt. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
So Conservative MPs have had their final say on who they'd like to be their leader and our next Prime Minister. But now it's over to Conservative Party members. What are they looking for? Are they mindful of who might be best placed to win the next election? Our GB News polling analyst, David Cowling, joins me now. David, let's have a look at the public polling on these two candidates and how they fare against Keir Starmer.
I think the first thing to understand is that for many members of the public, this has been an education because they don't really know much about these. Rishi Sunak, of course, because he's seen us through the pandemic and been Father Christmas for the best part of 2 years, handing out large sums of money in order to keep the economy afloat. But Liz Truss, Penny Mordaunt and others, names which might vaguely stick at the back of people's minds. So it's been catch-up. And therefore, I'm saying that because one has to be, I think, a bit cautious about when we say, what does the public think about them? They don't think a great deal. It's not meant to insult anybody, but it's a reality, and therefore we need to be careful about assuming too much. But Opinium asked the members of the public, which government would they support if it was led by, and they said Keir Starmer, 46% said Keir Starmer, Sunak, 35%. Okay. Liz Truss, Starmer, government led by Starmer, 46, Liz Truss, 32. So in both cases, they are behind. But again, it's terribly artificial. It's so hypothetical that I wouldn't want us to sort of get really tied into it and say, well, game, set and match, the next election is won. But those are some of the preliminary grounds. And so clearly either Sunak or Truss has much ground to catch up.
Let's have a look at the people who are deciding this, which is Conservative Party members. Who are they? Just tell us a bit about who is likely to be a Conservative Party member, what do they look like, how old are they, where do they live?
It's notoriously difficult because you need people to be sampled, but Professor Tim Bale has done with other colleagues sterling work in this. And to the best of my understanding of where they are, the average age is 50 and above, more men than women, significantly more members in the southeast than in the Midlands and in the north. In terms of attitudes, socially conservative in the main. Brexit, significantly. None of which is, I guess, perhaps too surprising, but the big challenge to them, Gloria, as it was to Labour Party members, is when you're confronted with a leader candidate, are you looking for somebody who makes you feel comfortable in yourself with what you think, what you believe? Or are you more looking for somebody who can form a government, win an election? The two aren't necessarily the same.
I know. Well, I lived under the period of Jeremy Corbyn when some members don't necessarily make both calculations. They often think, who makes me feel better about myself? Do we know who's winning their hearts so far, these Conservative Party members?
Well, still time to go, as we know, and lots of debates to take place. But there was a whole raft of polling of Conservative Party members. And I think the universal message so far appears to be that it's anybody but Sunak. So if they put him up against Mordaunt before her departure, they'd put him up against Truss. If they put him up against anybody else, almost invariably, it varied a little, but the thing that didn't vary was that other people won rather than him.
Which is fascinating. Yeah. Now, let's have a look at the Red Wall, first-time Tory voters and how they are feeling now. How much, do we know how much of that first-time Tory vote from lifelong Labour voters was because they loved Boris Johnson?
I think part of it was that, certainly. He was the Conservative who made it easier for lifelong Labour voters to cross that great divide, jump that great chasm from going from Labour to Conservative. He made it easier in a way that perhaps another Conservative leader might not have done. But that wasn't all by any means. Labour had alienated them. Brexit was an issue. And therefore, I think that there was a whole raft of things which brought them to make that big step. And the polling that's taken place over the last year or so seems to suggest significant swings back to Labour amongst tranches of those voters as the Conservative Party has crumbled and disintegrated, followed by one embarrassment after another. And the big if, of course, is with a new leader, can that new leader turn that back? And the difficulty I think they're going to face is that the communities that we're talking about need investment. The Conservatives have promised investment, but at the same time they're talking about cutting taxes and they're talking about bringing down the overall debt that's come from COVID, which is massive. So how can they do the two at the same time? And if they can't deliver to those first-time voters, I think, they're going to have their revenge back on them at the next election.
Boris Johnson referred to Keir Starmer at Prime Minister's Questions yesterday as a pointless human bollard. He is sort of mocked for being boring, for being dull. The last time we spoke, which was on local elections day, you were saying the public haven't really made up their minds about him. They don't really know anything about him. Is he making any progress? Because actually he's not going to get any media or prominence for the next couple of months while we have this contest and get a new Prime Minister.
You're absolutely right on the last point. I suppose he might question, how does that go? I mean, if it's nothing but bloody civil war, then he'll be very happy to be stepping back and say, no, please, after you. Do stab each other, please. So there's an element of that. Sorry, that's not answering your question. He is still an unknown factor to a number of people. The big advantage he's got at the moment is that the big beast in the jungle that he was always being compared unfavourably towards Johnson has gone.
Yes.
And we're now getting Sunak to one side. We're getting a set of Conservatives coming forward whom hardly anybody knows. So to be brutal about it, the ground has been cleared, which may make it a better opportunity for him to prosper and his virtues to come to the fore.
David Cowling, thank you for bringing us the benefit of your wisdom and expertise. A lifetime of polling you bring us. Thank you. Now it's time for our constituency surgery, where we talk with an MP and one of their constituents about an issue they're working on together. Today I'm talking with Kerry Roberts, whose daughter Leah died, aged just 15, after taking MDMA, and with her colleague Kevin Hollinrake, Conservative MP for Thirsk and Moulton. I have to say, we've been talking about Tory leadership and sort of Westminster throughout most of this programme, but by far the thing that I have been most looking forward to is talking to you, Kerry. I'm really grateful for you joining me today. Kerry, tell me about your daughter Leah and what happened to her.
So Leah was 15, and she went out with her friends on a Saturday night, sorry. She took MDMA. So I got a phone call about 9 o'clock to say it was off one of her friends, said, we think Leah's drank too much. You need to come and get her. We drove to the car park where she was, and she was laying on the floor. So I knew there was something wrong straight away. I jumped out the car. And she was still conscious. She said, "Mom," as I got there, but within seconds she went unconscious. She was slightly fitting. An ambulance had already been called. There was a policeman already there. He'd called the ambulance. To me, it seemed like hours and it was going on forever. But the ambulance was there within minutes of me getting there. So.
It's heartbreaking to hear what you went through. This was in 2019. Tell me how and why you got in touch with your MP, Kevin. Just tell us why before we bring him in.
It was after court. I couldn't get the idea of the word consent out of my head, so I started a petition. And from there, a lot of people were interested, and the Crime Commissioner and other MPs were interested, and they told me about Kevin Hollinrake, and I think Kevin Hollinrake's office got in contact with me.
That's right. Wow. Well, Kevin, from your perspective, tell me, why did you get in touch with Kerry, and what's happened since you first met?
Well, it's such a devastating story, and as a parent myself, it's just the worst thing ever. So when somebody like Kerry comes to you with that story and tells it in such a, such a way, evocative way, you've as an MP, it's an absolute pleasure to help, and it's such a clear. There's such an imperative around doing this. The two young men who supplied the drugs to Leah, served 6 months in jail. And what Kerry identified straight away is there's no requirement for courts to hand down a tougher sentence to somebody who supplies drugs to a child compared to supplying drugs to an adult. And in lots of other areas of the law, of course, the law does protect children more than it protects adults. Just think of supplying cigarettes or alcohol to a young person. Clearly, there are clear penalties for doing that. And what Kerry argued, and I agree with her, there should be tougher penalties for drug dealers who supply drugs to children as a deterrent. To do that, we should then reduce the amount of drugs supplied to children. And that, of course, when that does happen, of course, when people supply drugs to children, they're more likely to provide them to their friends, so the cycle continues. So I think tougher penalties around this, as they do in other countries, would be absolutely the right thing to do.
Kevin, you have done loads in Parliament on this. Just tell me what the progress you're making is and where it goes next.
OK, well, the easiest way forward is for the government to recognise there's a problem here and be willing to fix it. That's the easiest way to go forward. I've met with the ministers on that. I've met the Crown Commissioner as well, who supported the North Yorkshire Police and Crown Commissioner. But I've met with ministers who are very sympathetic. But the government's line at the moment is they don't think they're going to make any change at this point in time. But that's the kind of stock response you get from the government. You know that, Gloria. So we need to persuade them. So what I'm doing is taking forward a motion called a 10-minute rule motion. It gives me 10 minutes on the floor of the House, which I took the opportunity on Tuesday to be able to explain why we need this legislation. And if the government won't move, then we'll try and take this legislation through the House by use of something called a private member's bill. So when members of Parliament, backbenchers like me, can try and take that through the House and get the House on side to support it and take it through the both houses of Parliament. It would be easier, of course, if the government recognised the problem, which I think actually they will, and put something in one of their own pieces of legislation to make this very simple change. And we hope that'll happen in the coming months.
Kerry, you would never have wanted to become the campaigner that you are. I've read a fair bit about you. You're an extraordinary person. Many things have touched me about what you have been through. You as part of your campaign, you befriended the mum of one of the boys who sold the drugs, or who gave the drugs to Leah. Just tell us about that.
We got together through, again, the Crown Commissioner at the time. She introduced us, or introduced someone that could introduce us. And, we met, and we realised we were both victims in different ways. But he was a victim of county lines. Leah was the obvious victim, but we realised we could make a difference together.
Just finally, Kerry, what would it mean to get Leah's law introduced to you?
I think in Leah's name, to be able to protect other children and stop other families from going through this is my biggest aim.
I just want to say thank you for coming on. You are welcome to come back on this programme anytime. We will follow the progress of this. And everybody here just sends their love and admiration for you for trying to stop any other family going through with what you have been through. Kerry and Kevin, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now, how can we reduce drug-related deaths in Scotland, which is the highest rate in all of Europe? A new report out today by the head of Scotland's Drug Task Force has recommended an overhaul of addiction services. To tell us more is our Scotland reporter, David Donaldson, who joins us now. So tell us more about this report, if you would, Davy.
Yeah, this has been 3 years in the making, the Changing Lives report by the Drug Task Force Scotland. It came out today. There are 20 recommendations in the report and 139 action points. Now, some of those include the rolling out of naloxone, which is the drug which can help, obviously, people that have had an overdose come round and certainly reverse that process. Now, for the first time ever anywhere in the world, the Scottish Police Force are going to be carrying that. There was talk as well of the recommendations to have that on buses and taxis and various other public places, so that any drug addicts who have overdosed can be revived and we can try and save their lives. Other things that's in the report is a drug centre where addicts can come and actually take drugs there in a safe environment. Lots of people have questioned that, but of course they've looked at footage across the world and other ways of tackling drugs across the world and realised that this is a very, very positive step. No dirty needles, that kind of thing. Earlier on today I caught up with the man behind the report, the chairman of the Drug Task Force in Scotland, David Strang.
Every day in Scotland, 3 people die from a drug overdose, and those are shocking statistics. Each death is a tragedy for the individual, for their family, and for the community, and for all of Scotland. The Changing Lives report says that we need to treat addiction as a health issue, The First Minister has described the number of deaths in Scotland as a public health crisis, a public health emergency. But at the moment, people who have addictions are often not treated on a par with other health conditions, and that's one of the central recommendations from our report, that this should be. The use of safe, supervised drug consumption facilities, we think, will make a difference because it'll be a safe place for people who are using drugs, rather than taking drugs they don't know what they are with a dirty needle in some dark place. And it will also provide opportunities for referral to other treatment services. What we say is that it needs to be developed locally. There needs to be a local needs assessment run by the local director of public health director, and there should be consultation with local communities, with the police, with the NHS in each area that we're thinking of putting them in.
A lot of people will say that, you know, that's really just playing into the hands of people taking drugs rather than actually helping them.
The evidence from internationally, we've looked at other cities, and it is found to improve health. Your question suggests that people are seeing this as a crime, but addiction is not a crime. You can't punish people out of addiction, and people who have the health condition of addiction need support and care and treatment.
There we go, David Strang there, the chairman of the Drug Task Force in Scotland, tackling some of the points that have been the recommendations in this report. As I say, we've been waiting 3 years for this report. So as you can imagine, everyone else has had their say. We've got the Scottish Conservatives come out and said this is why it's disgraceful that Nicola Sturgeon is pressing ahead with plans for a divisive independence referendum next year. This is a time that resources should be spent on tackling record levels of drugs right now. I also caught up with Angela Constance, the drug minister in Scotland. She wouldn't be drawn on how quickly we're likely to see any reduction in drug deaths, given we're going to implement these new recommendations in the report.
Really interesting, David. Thank you very much indeed for bringing us the details of that report. Thanks. You have been watching and listening to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. I'm back every Monday to Thursday from noon, 10 to 12 on a Wednesday, of course, when it's PMQ. Up next, it is On the Money with Liam Halligan. MPs, they go on holiday today for the summer, but politics certainly will not stop with the Conservative leadership contest in full swing. For now, it is time for your weather. I will see you next week.
Hello, I'm Alex Deacon with your latest weather updates. Most places having a dry but fairly drab day today. Quite a lot of cloud across the country, but some spots seeing some sunshine, and temperatures continue to drop off after the extremes of earlier in the week. High pressure is moving in, but these weather fronts aren't too far away. They will influence things come the weekend. More on that in a moment. Today, though, under that high pressure, most places dry. Maybe just one or two showers here and there over the Pennines, drifting into northwestern parts of England, maybe southwest Scotland. Otherwise, as I say, most places dry and cloudy, but some sunny spells. West Wales, southwest England, northern parts of Scotland, the north coast of Northern Ireland, seeing a bit of sunshine. When the sun's out, temperatures getting up into the low to mid-20s across the south, but mostly we're only in high teens, low 20s territory. Through this evening, we'll see a few more showers developing, parts of the Midlands, southern Scotland, then eastern Scotland. And overnight, maybe some heavier showers starting to drift into the Midlands, parts of South Wales in particular. A reasonably warm night, not like earlier in the week, but temperatures in the south holding up in